You should hear what keeps him up at night.
This is what keeps me up at night. I don't understand how my fellow Americans, I don't even understand how this election is close. And yes, I'm voting for you, but I would also vote for that wall over there.
Well, he's half right. We do need a wall. You know, to keep out gang members, fentanyl dealers, human traffickers, and Anna Navarro. What's funny, though, is that Stern actually thought that was a compliment. Stern has become such a wussified sycophant, he doesn't realize that telling Kamala that he'd vote for a wall is telling her that he knows she's as dumb as one.
Howard Stern built his empire on shock, rebellion, and tearing down the establishment. But when Greg Gutfeld aimed, the king of controversy went radio silent. No comebacks, no fire, just awkward silence echoing louder than words. In a stunning live segment, Gutfeld didn't just call out Stern's evolution, he exposed it as a full-blown sellout. The rebel had become the system, and Gutfeld lit the match. What happens when the uncensored icon gets out-rebelled on his turf?
But that's how Stern can call snacking with celebs at a fancy restaurant exhausting. Exhausting. Like he finished the overnight shift in a coal mine, or hearing Kat talk about her pets.
Fair.
But I get it, life is tough, especially when you've been cut off from the world for 2 years in a $20 million beach house. I mean, you have no idea how tiring it is walking all the way from the wine cellar to the tennis court and back.
There are TV moments you watch and forget, and then there are the ones that burn themselves into pop culture, like a meteor strike. Loud, fiery, and impossible to ignore. The recent clash between Greg Gutfeld and Howard Stern on live television was one of those moments. It wasn't just a war of words, it was a cultural collision. Two media giants from totally different planets collided, and only one of them walked away looking like he still belonged in the stratosphere. Howard Stern has long worn the crown of the king of all media.
But it is incredibly brave to take this stance after you've made $300, $400 million not being woke, right? Loving Donald Trump, exploiting the mentally ill, wearing blackface. Look at the crop of woke comics, whether it's Stern or Jimmy Kimmel, his BFF, Sarah Silverman, Joy Behar, Michael Ian Black. What do they all have in common? They wore blackface. And then they went woke. It's not a chicken or egg thing there. You know what order it came. So I call this BFR. It's blackface reparations. There's nothing in Stern's previous career that could withstand this modern witch hunt that he now embraces. So this is a form of restitution. Maybe he says, you know, if I'm woke too, the crocodile will eat me last. But they always do eat. But I get it. He flipped from populist to elitist because now he's with elitists.
Icon. Once a pioneer of shock radio, he made a name and an empire out of doing the things no one else dared. He was the brash voice of rebellion, the unfiltered conscience of a generation fed up with polite society. Stern's name was synonymous with disruption, defiance, and controversy. You either loved him or hated him, but you couldn't ignore him. But here's the thing about being a rebel king. Stay on the throne too long, and the edge starts to dull. Over the years, Stern has undergone a slow, curious transformation.
I will say this, Dagan. I thank God for Howard Stern because he does make me feel normal by comparison. Because I'm like the Fox recluse. I don't do anything. I don't go anywhere. But he makes me look like, you know, Pete Davidson on a...
Yeah, he's a germaphobe. Like, his wife rescues cats. That's her job, apparently, her thing. But you can get toxoplasmosis.
That's true.
Cryptosporidiosis.
AIDS.
And
no, you can't.
No,
but
you can't get.
No, you can't.
But you can get.
I mean, what are the chances I get that again?
Like a lot of diarrhea related.
From a brash outsider to a soft-spoken celebrity interviewer rubbing shoulders with Hollywood's elite, the Howard Stern of today often feels more like a polished talk show host than the volcanic force he once was. And that's where Greg Gutfeld saw an opening. A glaring, vulnerable crack in the armor. Gutfeld, for all his critics, has mastered the art of televised confrontation. The man is part political commentator, part late-night gesture, and part cultural demolition expert. He doesn't just argue, he dissects, ridicules, and exposes. With his nightly show blending sarcasm, satire, and stinging commentary, Gutfeld has built his empire by targeting sacred cows and igniting fires where others feared to tread. So when Stern popped up in one of Gutfeld's segments, casually, then suddenly, not so casually, the stage was set. What began as a brief mention turned into a focused, almost surgical takedown. Gutfeld didn't just question Stern's transformation, he dismantled it. He challenged the entire trajectory of Stern's evolution, mocking the man who once thrived on chaos for now preaching conformity from his penthouse studio.
On his radio show, Howard Stern defended wokeism, saying it's a compliment when someone calls him woke. Listen.
If woke means I can't get behind Trump, which is what I think it means, or that I support people who want to be transgender, or I'm for the vaccine, well, dude, call.
And let's be clear, this wasn't some offhand jab. Gutfeld leaned in hard. He framed Stern not as a legend, but as a cautionary tale. The message was clear. Howard Stern, once a fearless iconoclast, had become exactly what he used to rage against. In Gutfeld's world, that's the cardinal sin. Selling out, toning down, becoming part of the very machine you once fought to destroy. There was no need for shouting. Gutfeld didn't raise his voice or froth at the mouth. Instead, he sliced with precision, the way a surgeon handles a scalpel. He compared the old Stern, the wild-haired, reckless truth bomber who terrified censors and mocked elites, with the new, meticulously groomed Stern who now cozied up to celebrities he once shredded. It was a quiet gutting, a brutal unraveling of a legacy carefully built on rebellion but now teetering on respectability. The absurdity practically wrote itself. Here was the man who built an empire mocking phoniness, now wearing the very mask he used to tear off others. Gutfeld didn't even have to exaggerate. All he had to do was describe the transformation. The symbolism was devastating. The shock jock who once spat on the red carpet had now rolled it out for himself.
But Stern being holed up in his house that long, it explains a lot of things, like how you forget how other people live, especially in hard times like a pandemic. For the longest time, 2 years in fact, the same time Stern's been AWOL, I wondered where he went. Not physically, but mentally. I bet you did too. Remember his screeds about COVID? They were epic and angry, and not to mention wrong.
When are we going to stop putting up with the idiots in this country and just say, it's mandatory to get vaccinated? F them, f their freedom. I want my freedom to.
The guy who once wore defiance like a badge of honor now seemed obsessed with approval. Hollywood approval, corporate approval, mainstream approval. What made it hit even harder was the context. Gutfeld's show thrives on irreverence, on turning sacred cows into burgers. So when he aimed at Stern, it wasn't just another celebrity feud. It was a generational indictment. One voice accusing another of losing its soul. The punch wasn't just personal, it was philosophical. And Stern, for once, had no comeback. No fireworks, no takedown of his own. Just a thunderous silence. Gutfeld didn't need to win the exchange. The fact that it landed so cleanly and that the public immediately sensed something truthful in it was the real victory. Stern, once the guy who called everyone out, was finally the one being called out, and this time, it stuck. Viewers watched in real time as Gutfeld painted Stern as a ghost of his former self. It wasn't loud or belligerent. It was sharp, cold and cutting, and it struck a nerve, not just with fans of either figure, but with anyone who's watched a once revolutionary voice fade into comfortable irrelevance. The contrast between the two couldn't have been more vivid.
Even when I watch them on Saturday Night Live with the where they have Maya Rudolph playing you, I hate it. I don't want you being made fun of.
Oh my God.
There's too much at stake. I believe the entire future of this country right now, I mean, as America, land of the free, home of the brave, I think it's literally on the line.
So a guy who's supposed to be funny for a living now claims her candidacy is too important to joke about. This is a guy who once joked right after the Columbine massacre that the killers should have raped the students before killing them. Not that I like that Stern, but this pendulum swing from saying the most tasteless thing in the universe to putting your balls in a Tic Tac container. You gotta wonder what's going on here. It's striking that the king of the most misogynistic humor ever now turns into a breathless over a progressive, hopelessly shallow candidate.
Stern built his legacy in a time when breaking the rules meant getting fined by the FCC, banned from networks, and screamed at by sponsors. But that very resistance made him powerful. Gutfeld, on the other hand, came up in an era where cancel culture, outrage mobs, and social media takedowns were the new form of censorship. He learned to fight with sarcasm instead of swear words, ridicule instead of shock value. In many ways, the Gutfeld-Schern showdown wasn't just a battle of personalities, it was a clash between two eras of media. Gutfeld embodies the modern digital insurgency, slick, sarcastic, meme-ready rebellion that thrives on calling out hypocrisy in 30-second viral bursts. And the audience? They saw it all unfold like a courtroom drama with no judge, just two gladiators and a million viewers waiting to declare a winner. What really stung for Stern was how easily Gutfeld pulled back the curtain. He didn't attack Stern's past, he praised it. The insult was in the comparison.
Happy Friday, America! Oh man, tonight is a special night. It's Feminine Friday, where all the panelists are women. Tonight we have Kennedy, David McDowell, Kat Tim, and Janine Garofalo. All right. A long way for a meat joke. Okay, I hope you had a good week. I did, and no thanks to Howard Stern. True, the New York Post reported that Stern hit a chic restaurant in NYC with a crew of A-listers, including Jimmy Kimmel, Jennifer Aniston, Jon Hamm, Justin Theroux, Jason Bateman. I was not invited. I guess
the old Stern Gutfeld implied would have torn apart the sanitized version that now showed up on satellite radio and late-night talk shows in a designer hoodie. That old Stern wouldn't have recognized the man who now waxed philosophical with Hollywood elites or played softball interviews with A-listers like he was on a charity telethon. To Gutfeld, Stern had gone from cultural sniper to media monk, muzzled, manicured, and all too comfortable with the very system he once burned down. And once that image stuck, there was no unseeing it. The aftermath was instant. Social media lit up with clips, commentary, and reactions from every possible corner of the internet. The clip had gone viral, and not because of some outrageous statement, but because Gutfeld had said what a lot of former Stern fans had been thinking for years, but never said out loud. It raised bigger questions too. Can anyone truly remain a rebel forever?
Stern got even more pathetic, wondering how she doesn't nap.
When you said you don't nap, I get it, because like what you've taken on is extraordinarily difficult. And I mean, do you feel the pressure of the moment in the sense that, like when I met you out in the hall, I said, I'm really nervous because I want this to go well for you. I want it to go well for the country.
Hold on. I need a minute.
Is it inevitable that every firebrand becomes part of the establishment they once despised? Or worse, do they all eventually start defending that establishment once their seat at the table is secure? Gutfeld seemed to argue that the problem wasn't that Stern had changed, it was how he changed. Not through a genuine ideological shift, but through calculated self-preservation. The man who once claimed to fear nothing now seemed afraid of offending anyone. The one who mocked celebrity culture now appeared obsessed with being accepted by it. And in Gutfeld's view, that kind of transformation isn't growth, it's surrender. Ironically, Stern's silence in the immediate aftermath only made things worse. The man who once thrived on confrontation, who built an entire career out of eviscerating critics with lightning-fast comebacks, suddenly disappeared. It gave the impression, fair or not, that Stern had nothing left in the tank, that he'd been caught off guard, and maybe, deep down, even agreed with the criticism.
This definition of woke, it's if you call someone a know-it-all, you're not complimenting them on the breadth of their knowledge. Yeah. You're saying you don't know as much as you think you know. So, yeah, woke doesn't have anything to do with vaccines. What it really means is sort of a slavish devotion to left-wing ideology and then repeating it so you can get social credit.
Right.
That's really what it means.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that you're smarter than anybody. And he had said in another part of this set, because I believe in the science. Well, if you believed in the science, you wouldn't be hiding out like Howard Hughes in your mansion.
Yeah.
So
Viewers who once admired his fire were left wondering where that edge had gone. It wasn't just that he didn't respond, it's that he couldn't. Gutfeld threw a punch, and Stern didn't even flinch. Not in defiance, but in confusion. In an industry built on reaction and narrative control, Stern's failure to respond wasn't just a missed opportunity. It felt like quiet confirmation. Meanwhile, Gutfeld continued, almost smugly, like a man who knew he had thrown a punch that landed. He didn't gloat, but he didn't need to. The internet was doing it for him. Thousands of comments, retweets, and YouTube reactions did more to validate his critique than any follow-up monologue ever could. What made it all the more fascinating was that Gutfeld wasn't attacking a random celebrity. He was aiming at someone who once defined the very act of attacking others. Howard Stern had built a career on targeting hypocrisy, ego, and phoniness. It wasn't just celebrity gossip or late-night drama, it was a mirror held up to the idea of legacy. Stern was being asked to reckon with the weight of his history. That's the curse of being a legend. Your past self becomes the measuring stick, and if you fall short, no one's more brutal than your former fans.
I always hate that argument, like, what happened to the old Stern, or what people have changed. That's not what this is about. It's a weird disconnect.
Well, he hasn't changed.
No.
People have been calling him insane for 40 years.
Yeah,
that just used to be, this guy's nuts. And now they're like, oh, we're worried about Howard. He needs help. Mm-hmm. But I'll tell you, though, I'm a little sympathetic because what you said is correct, but I'm also a germaphobe.
Yeah.
And, you know,
The entire exchange, direct or not, felt like a scathing commentary on the media industry at large, a mirror reflecting its slow decay. Gutfeld's rise wasn't accidental. It was built on the very traits Stern once embodied, but now appears to have buried: unfiltered humor, relentless defiance, and zero regard for polished narratives. While legacy media stumbles under the weight of self-censorship and corporate sensitivity, Gutfeld has filled the vacuum with bold, brash commentary that resonates. He taps into the hunger for authenticity that Stern once fed, but where Stern now opts for soft interviews and social acceptance, Gutfeld charges forward, reckless and raw. In the crumbling media landscape, it's not just a battle of personalities, it's a changing of the guard. It's not about politics, it's about authenticity, or at least the perception of it. And in that moment on live TV, Gutfeld looked like the more authentic voice, the man willing to say the unsayable, even if it meant going after a legend. Stern, by contrast, looked like he was still clinging to a reputation that no longer matched his reality.
Striking that the king of the most misogynistic humor ever now turns into a breathless over a progressive, hopelessly shallow candidate. But maybe that's the explanation. This is Stern's self-imposed penance for subjugating women to demoralizing stunts, capitalizing on desperate females thirsting for attention, even if it's from an oily past.
Whether or not that's fair isn't the point. In media, perception is reality. The question now is what happens next. Does Stern reclaim his edge and prove the critics wrong? Or does he continue down the polished, professional path that makes him more palatable but less powerful? And does Gutfeld, now clearly unafraid to punch up, become the new face of unfiltered commentary in a world desperate for it? One thing's for sure, the torch has been passed, or maybe it was snatched. Either way, the showdown between Greg Gutfeld and Howard Stern wasn't just a media moment, it was a cultural shift. A generational handoff, a public reckoning for a man who once was the reckoning. And whether you love or hate either of them, you felt it. You knew something had changed. Because that's what happens when a king gets called out by the court jester, especially when the jester is sharper, faster, and still hungry.